Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. So this next conversation is one for the history books, literally. We are speaking about Jerry Besson's posthumous publications. And joining us in studio this morning is Alice Besson, Managing Director of Pariah Publishing. Good morning, Alice, and welcome.
Good morning, Natasha. Thank you for inviting me over.
It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show this morning. Thank you for coming and thank you for bringing these incredible books to share with our viewers this morning on set. Now, we have to get into, of course, the history behind these books. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your former husband, your late husband, Jerry, and the impact that he has left on Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region as well, and anybody with that heritage. Can you give us a little insight into Jerry outside of what we would know as the founder of so many different things and contributing to our history?
Well, Jerry was born in 1942, had a long life in the arts, in advertising, in communications, and in history. He founded Pariah Publishing as his second company after his advertising agency in 1981, and with a view to publishing and republishing books about the history and folklore of Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. And when he and I met in the late 90s, Pariah was kind of mothballed. It still came out of the period of transition after the recession and the advertising agency being sold. And I said, well, let's restart it. And since then, we must have produced and published 140 books since the 90s.
Now, this is incredible.
And Jerry himself started late in life, but when he retired, more or less, to write about history in a much larger style. And it started with a newspaper series of articles. Then he also started a blog, which up to today probably has about 1.7 million visitors. And then he started to write fiction and non-fiction books, historical novels and also non-fiction books, folklore. He was, of course, a well-known raconteur about folklore, who appeared in this forum as well several times, and a commentator on current events on various media. So Jerry was really always there for Pariah Publishing, of course, but I think he was always also there for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because and beyond. Yeah. I remember during COVID, he was giving Zoom meetings with school children, hundreds of school children during COVID, about history, about folklore, and yeah, and in between writing, up to the very day he passed.
So let's talk about that writing, because we have with us today, if I'm not mistaken, they're docudramas, correct?
Yes.
These books. And it's quite fascinating because I've seen them on the Caribbean History Archive. So to see them here in person is just mind-blowing. But you did share that there's some interesting stories behind both of these. So let's go into let's start with the first book, or book first.
So book first, Philippine Children of the Sun, is about Janet, free Negro woman of Cariaco, Grenada. And she's actually a very well-known historical character. She's well-researched. And Jerry had he wanted to write about her, oh gosh, for 20 years, really. And he had the good fortune during COVID that Peter Redhead from Poughkeepsie, New York, got in touch with him about something that I think he came across his blog post about Janet. And what happened is that during the lockdown, Peter Redhead in Poughkeepsie, New York, found a way to access documents for Jerry.
Oh, wow.
And they started a conversation about the various characters in the book. All the while, Peter Redhead was feeding us documents about, like, birth certificates, wills, you know, the old handwritten 18th, 19th century documents, all sorts of things. And a dialogue started between the two of them. And eventually, Jerry took every little scrap of information he could find from those documents and started to create stories around them. And eventually, what happened is that he was able to even find a couple things that academia had not as yet found out about these actually quite well-known characters. And of course that was really, really exciting for him,
of course,
as a amateur historian, to still find a couple things that nobody knew. Actually, he managed that in the second book as well. So the first book is really about Jeannette, her French husband Honoré Philippe, who was a baker. They got married and they became very rich. And Jerry was always wondering, how did they become so rich? And so what he does is he takes this couple and their children, and he virtually writes a short story, an exciting short story, an adventurous short story about all of them. So we have piracy, we have somebody going to the French Revolution and having to find his way all the way through France in the French Revolution. All these children from Carriacou and Grenada go on wonderful adventures, and you will meet wonderful people. Always a little bit on the verge of magical realism, of course, because that was Jerry's style. And may I show the back of the book?
Of course, of course.
On both books, on the back of it, there is a QR code.
Okay.
And when you scan that, you can get to Jerry's blog.
Oh, wonderful.
And it has the documents on it, the original documents that we got from Peter Redhead and found in our own archives.
This is absolutely beautiful. So we see the intertwining of course, these real-time historical documents, these real documents, and then what one would perceive to be what may have been and what could have been. But that's the beauty of these writings, because anything is possible. But it's also amazing because you also don't, you see the focus on history and of some issues that are still touched on today as well. Is that the same for the second book, or book second
and third?
There we go.
Yes, of course. So book second and third are about two of the descendants of Jeannette and Honoré from the first book. And the one of them is J.B. Philippe, Jean-Baptiste Philippe, and the other one is Maxwell Philippe. Both of them have streets named after them in Port of Spain. And J.B. Philippe is very well known, again in history, for having won the first civil rights case in the New World against Governor Woodford. And again, Jerry takes all the cornerstones, the historical cornerstones that he could find, and spins characters around them, and dialogue, and adventure. And he asks himself, how could that be that J.B. Philippe had that knowledge and that interest? It turns out that J.B. Philippe was educated in Scotland, so he comes back to Trinidad as a Scotsman with a Scottish accent in this French-speaking, back then French and Patois-speaking, early 19th century Trinidad. So again, all the adventures that he has here coming back from Scotland, because he spent all his childhood and youth in Scotland. And then book third is about Maxwell Philippe. And Maxwell Philippe was, of course, a very rambunctious and well-known and well-spoken lawyer in the mid and late 19th century, after whom Maxwell Philippe Street is named. And what a nice story about that book is that at the very end, when Jerry was already feeling his life ebbing away, he was like, how am I going to end this story? How am I going to end this story? And he said, let's go and tidy up a bit. And I found a document, a photocopy of a document, which was the last will and testament of Maxwell Philippe.
Oh, wow.
Which Jerry had gotten months and months before, and completely forgotten that he had gotten it out of the public offices. And I deciphered it for him and I helped him. By that time, he couldn't even write anymore. He was able to dictate to me a wonderful, exciting ending. And again, something new that even historians hadn't really put together as yet. So a wonderful ending. Jerry passed away on the 25th of July last year, and on the 11th of July he was able to put the end under all three books. And it was such a, you know, when you're a writer and you feel you don't have time to finish what you have started, well, he was able to finish it, which was a wonderful, wonderful end to his oeuvre, his life's work, and to his life, really.
I mean, absolutely beautiful story, and amazing to see the way that his life just spanned and came full circle. And thank you so much for sharing that this morning with us. We are out of time, unfortunately, but before we go, where can we get the book?
The books are available in local bookstores. Okay. We will keep you all abreast on our social media, and internationally on Amazon and online retailers.
Well, Alice, thank you so much for joining us this morning and sharing your story, and of course these beautiful books.
Thank you.
And wishing you an incredible day.
Thank you.
Alice Besson, Managing Director of Paria Publishing, here with us this morning to share some posthumous publications of Jerry Besson. Stay tuned, the Now Morning Show will be back after this break.